Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Hager. This is their part number 15S. This is a flush pole is what this is. Shown in the US26D Satin Chrome finish. Let's take a look at the item up close. We'll start with some dimensional properties of the item. Weighs about 0.82 pound, by the way. Completely non-handed. Could be installed with either orientation that you like. Overall height of the plate, about 5 inch. Overall width, about 3 7/16. The box, about 3 1/4. About 2 5/8, I'd say. Overall depth, looks like it's about 7/8. And the depth of the box itself, it's closer to 3/4 inch. Now, what is this, and what is it used for, and why might you be looking at it? Let's talk about that right now. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. The Hager 15S is what's called a flush pole, is what it is. They call it a flush cup door pole. This piece of equipment is used generally when you have either sliding doors or even at times swinging doors where you can grab on the inside and pull the door out. But it's very commonly seen in a sliding application, or the platform of hardware that this has grown out of is most definitely a sliding application. But you'll see these installed generally not so large when it is a swinging application, because generally swinging applications would have the design idea of minimizing the hardware. Go with a smaller flush pole. Hager makes them smaller than the 15S, and you're going to see on that same door probably center hung pivots and then a roller latch. They want to have center hung pivots so the hinges or the pivots are concealed. You don't see a lot of hardware. You might alternatively have an edge pole attached to the edge of the door, but sliding applications is where you'll see this, most likely in a more commercial type setting than residential. It's a bit large for residential. It's a lot of hardware for a residential application. And while this is not handicap compliant because it's just simply not large enough of an area, Hager does offer them handicap compliant. You will see these very commonly in those commercial applications where you've got high volume on a sliding door or a pair of sliding doors, and you need to be able to have something that's going to be more accommodating than just a small, 2 1/8 inch cup pole, which they use the term cup pole here. A cup pole is more of a 1/2 inch deep, 2 1/16 of an inch diameter unit that just gets installed right into the face of the door that you'll see very much so in residential applications. Now, if you're looking at this, you probably need something probably for a sliding door, would be my guess. The installation of this is very simple and straightforward, and how you go about doing it is how you go about doing it, how I would go about doing it. And by the way, it includes its screws. There are far more here than necessary. This is likely just a standard screw package that they would use to send with a push plate. So you've got more screws here than you're going to need. And we'll talk about what you use those screws for in a moment. Now, how will you go about installing this? Well, if it's a new installation, if you're doing a new project, doors and frames and hardware, have your door manufacturer, have the door supplier prep for these. If you are adding these after the fact, well, the way I would go about doing it is I would use a router. And the bottom line is, depending on how many of these I had to do, would dictate how much pre-setup work I would do. If I had a number of these to do, I would make myself a template. I would get 1 by poplar, 3/4 inch poplar. I would lay off, I would cut a hole in the piece of wood that's going to act as my template. The size of that would be what I would need for this preparation, based on the allowance for the router guide as well, and the diameter of the bit that I'm using. And I would place that on the edge of the door and I would clamp it down. If I was wanting to do it as lazily as possible, I would probably cut a piece of wood that would allow me to square it off not only to the edge of the door, flush it to the edge, but square it off to the bottom of the door so that I could maintain a consistent height from the bottom of the door. And where I place that prep from the edge is going to allow me to not have to measure a back set at all once I determine that. And then squaring it to the bottom of the door, I'll never have to measure a center line. Why you would go to the bottom of the door? Well, because 6'8", 7'0", 8'0", 14-foot tall doors, whatever it might be, that dimension from the floor to the center line of the prep is what's going to stay the same regardless of door height. So that's how I would go about doing it. If you're doing just one or two, I would certainly not recommend a hammer and chisel. I would use a router in almost any event. And the reason I say that is because that's a quite sloppy way to get a result, in my opinion. Or maybe it's because I lack hammer and chisel skills. But you need to have the preparation of the door be nice and tight up against the welded on, or actually it's glued on, the glued on body that's here. There's adhesive. And the reason they, just a sidetrack, they'll use adhesive to hold this on so there's no welding marks that are here at all. I would definitely, we'll look at the template, but I would make this no larger than what I needed. I would not make it so large that I did not have to square the corners, because you've got a screw hole here and a screw hole here. That needs to secure into the core of what you're installing. Now these screws, in my opinion, aren't really ideal for that at all, because it's very possible that you're installing that into particle board. It's not a lot there in terms of screw withdrawal strength. It's how the manufacturer supplies it. It clearly has been tested to work. There you go. I'm just not a fan of using such a small screw in terms of length. I'd prefer something probably closer to 1 inch or 1.25 inch length, so I could really sink it in a little bit better. But the point is if you make that cutout so large, you're losing a lot of the ability of the screw's penetration into what you're drilling into. So nice and tight on that prep, and I would square those corners out. Small amount of wiggle room, just to allow you to make sure that you've got the hardware completely vertical on the door. But your template, if you build one, that would prove to be quite a quite elegant way to go about doing that. Let's switch to the screen view and let's take a closer look at the supporting information. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Here's the item that we are indeed looking at. Let's start off with looking at some photographs that we have here. Here's the box. The unit itself with the screws. Close-up view of the unit. You know, I'm going to use this as a really great opportunity to show the difference between how close stainless steel and satin chrome are. This backer box is made of stainless. Brushed finish. It's almost identical, and in fact, I think under the right light it might seem identical, but what I'm saying is I believe this to be stainless and I believe this faceplate to be brass. It just shows you how close of a finish the two are. I believe that's what it is. Small amount of magnetism on this piece, which stainless steel does pick up a small amount of magnetism when it's been machined, whereas the plate alone appears to exhibit no magnetic properties at all. Close-up of the grain structure of the faceplate, and then the screw package. So it's just nice to be able to take a look at what that looks like. Now, extended description information here. They give us dimensions, finishes, polished brass, satin bronze, oil rub bronze, polished chrome, satin chrome, aluminum. I don't know that this is really done in aluminum. And then stainless steel. You can do these back to back. Wouldn't be uncommon at all to have these back to back if it's obviously a sliding door. Be the 25N is how you would change that part number. Now there's a link here to the template. Let's take a look at the template. And this is going to show you the installation, the Mortise. Yeah. So the downside of this sort of preparation is that it's really a two-step operation, as we're seeing, so that my earlier commentary about the template will need to be modified slightly. Let's take a look at that. What they have here is, and you can see it in the cross section, the flange of the back box is going to require a small amount of accommodation. And, you know, what you might end up considering doing is making yourself a template that was the 4 1/8 inch overall size. And then you would only go so deep as what the flange allowed, which is 3/32 of an inch. Your router would be set for that very deep prep. Then on top of that, you might stack an additional template that has only the required size for the body depth, body prep itself. You might consider doing that, using a router with a 2.5 inch long 2-flute 1/2 inch carbide bit, you know, using a plunge router basically to be able to go through all of that template. That would certainly work. You know, or making a separate template. Obviously you're going to cover all of that up, you know, with your hardware, but you still want it to be very close so that you minimize the amount of space that's here. Now in terms of a back set, the dimension from the edge of the door to the vertical center line, that's up to your discretion. Where you end up putting that is how you will end up putting that. I would probably take an audit of the balance of the doors in the space to not only determine how far from the edge of the door to the vertical center line, but also at what dimension you want to install it, say from the finished floor, so that everything appears to be compatible with each other. Now there's also a link to the document called Product Catalog. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at the product catalog. This will allow us to go through flush poles from Hager. They have those that are surface mounted, where screws are right through the flange. You have a through bolted version. You have the concealed mount, which is the 15S. They call that light duty. I probably wouldn't call that light duty. The 16N is a much smaller unit, as is the 17N. You get into these applications where you would use them in lower volume or possibly even residential applications. There is your through bolted 25B set. Here's a very large unit. This will allow the hardware to act as both a pull and a push. That's 16R. Heavy duty, back to back, in the 25C. They are sex bolted. And the difference between, you know, the 25C or 25N and the 15C and 15N, it's just the base material. The 15 or the 25C is only made in stainless steel, or the 15 or 25N is made in brass. Although they do list aluminum, brass, bronze, and stainless steel. Back to back, the push-pull combinations. Handicap compliant versions. Much taller, much wider and a little bit deeper on the handicap compliant version. Okay. Now, there is a link below this video, as seen here, to the manufacturer's page. When you click on that, you'll be able to pull up the manufacturer's page on our site. You'll see at that link not only all of the Hager products that we sell by means of that horizontal navigation as seen there, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the current product catalog, as well as encyclopedic documents such as the Hager Keying Service Manual, the 2010 ADA Standards for Accessible Design, a screw chart. If you want to know how many screws are going to come on a particular size kick plate, there's a link for that as well. Let's wrap up this video on camera. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. So here's a final look at your 15S flush pull. The name Hager is synonymous with practically everything builders, hardware related. Their name was Hager Hinge, and that's kind of how we always thought of them. But it's more than just hinges with Hager. It's all of the product groups that you could get into, really with the exception of the door and frame. Hinges, door closers, lock sets, exit devices, electrified hardware, Roton continuous geared aluminum hinges, trim and auxiliary, weather stripping, accessory hardware, sliding door hardware, and it's a very comprehensive product offering from them. Great loyalty Hager enjoys from the general marketplace. I have found people will call and say, hey, I need that 15S. Well, that's a made-to-order item. I have it in stock by someone else. No, I'll wait for the 15S. Thank you. So I encounter that often. And actually, a fun fact I just read in a press release that Hager now has the 7th generation of Hager to work within the company. So that's a fun fact for them and good for them. Any questions on the Hager 15S flush pull in a 26D finish or any other Hager product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.